Hello, Algebra 2 students. This is Miss Prater, and I will be out testing, given the pre-ACT in the Mobile area on October the 2nd and the 3rd. And so this would have been the lesson that I would have taught y'all on Wednesday, October the 2nd. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this with you in case that you need the information. So it's on sections 406 and 407. Let's take a little look at the do now. If you want to just pause, it says, can you find the mistake in the problem? So the question is right here. So that means there is a mistake. So if you want to hit the stop button on your video and take a minute to see if you can find the mistake. And then when you think you found it, you can click play again. So this is a synthetic division problem, and the first step is that you take the p plus 1 and you set it equal to 0 and you solve. And that does give you p equals -1, which becomes your divisor for synthetic division. Bring down the 1. 1 times -1 is -1. Combine -3. Do it again. -3 times -1 is 3. Combine 4. Do it again. 4 times -1 is 4. Combine -7, do it again. -7 times -1 is +7. 2 and 7 combine to be 9. I don't see any mistakes there. The next step is to go to your highest exponent and subtract 1, and that becomes the first exponent of the first term in your answer. So this is your 1. So this is 1p to the, this should be third, this should be the second, this should be the first, and this should just be -7. So the mistake came from that very last step, where when you're dividing a p into a p to the 4th, then your answer has to be the highest exponent minus 1, and that would be the highest exponent in your first term, and then you decrease from there. This is the week of, at a glance, this is the week that starts with Monday, September the 30th, and goes through Friday, October the 4th. We're finishing up with Unit 4. With a 4.10 unit review on Friday. These are our objectives for the Alabama Course of Study for Algebra 2, but we're going to focus on how to use synthetic substitution to find values and solutions. If we were doing this in a live Class Connect, I would have a Kahoot to give you as an option of going through the examples of something other than going through the examples with me. Since this is a video, I can't give you the Kahoot, but another choice would be to work some challenge problems on slide 10, and I believe these are ACT problems that I got from an ACT practice test, and then there are answers on slide 11, so you could still do that if you wanted to, since it's built into the deck. So we're going to talk a little bit about the polynomial remainder theorem. So polynomial remainder theorem. And it's basically when they give you a factor. So this says find the remainder of this polynomial once it's divided by the following. So our remainder is always the last thing that we bring down in synthetic division, if we use synthetic division. And most of the time, synthetic division is just going to be quicker, because remember, it's a fake way to do long division and we don't have to use the variables, so it's going to be a little bit easier. So when they give you a factor, so you're going to know you have a factor when you have a variable plus or minus a number. So before you find this remainder, you have to remember that that first step is to take the factor, set it equal to 0, solve for x. That's going to give us x equals +1. And that +1 will go outside of the house for synthetic division. And then this is where we only use our coefficients, 2, 3, -17, and -30. We're not missing any terms, so we don't have to put any 0 placeholders, because I have x cubed, x squared, x to the 1, and a constant. You leave the second row blank, you draw your line, you bring down the first coefficient, and then you start your process. 2 times 1 is 2, combine 5. 5 times 1 is 5, combine -12. Negative 12 times 1 is negative 12. Combine negative 42. So my remainder is negative 42, and that's what they're looking for. So the directions say find the remainder. So they're just wanting the remainder. They don't want to know the polynomial that you get from dividing. In this particular question, they're just asking for the remainder. In the next problem, the directions are exactly the same. Find the remainder when this polynomial is divided by each of the following, but this time they don't give you a factor. So they don't give you x plus a number or x minus a number. They write the problem with f of negative 2. So when they do that, negative 2 is what you're dividing by. And then you use your 2, your 3, your negative 17, and your negative 30. We're still looking for the remainder here. So we go through the process of synthetic division, which is drop down the first coefficient and start your process. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Combine negative 1. Do it again. Negative 1 times negative 2 is positive 2. Combine negative 15. Negative 15 times negative 2 is positive 30. And our remainder is 0. So 0 would be our answer. So you could see it either way. Same set of directions. This way they're giving you a factor, and your first step has to be set that factor equal to 0 and solve. And then this 1 is what you're dividing by using synthetic division. If they give you the problem as f parentheses of a number or g parentheses of a number, then that is the exact number that you are using to use synthetic division with. This problem is asking us which binomials are factors. So they're giving us a polynomial, they're giving us the factors. So there's a couple different ways that you could do this. You could take each one of these factors, set them equal to 0, and solve. So this one would give me x equals negative 1. This one would give me x equals negative 2. This factor, if set equal to 0 and solve, would give me x equals positive 1. And this one would give me positive 2. And you could actually do synthetic division with all 4 of these. And when your remainder is 0, that's how you know you have a factor. Okay, so I'm going to write this down. When your remainder is 0, that proves you have a factor. So if I will do synthetic division with a negative 1 and my remainder is 0, that means x plus 1 is a factor. If I do synthetic division with negative 2 and the remainder is 0, that means x plus 2 is a factor. If I do positive 1 with synthetic division and get a remainder of 0, that means x minus 1 is a factor. If I did 2 and divide by positive 2 and got a remainder of 0, then that would mean x minus 2 is a factor. That takes a long time, so that's like 4 synthetic division problems. So you could do it the old-fashioned way, and I meant to mention this up here. Let me go back to this because I forgot to do this. So another method, instead of just taking this negative 2 and finding the remainder using synthetic division, so another method is just the old-fashioned way, is where you would plug negative 2 in for every place you see an x. So if I just take f of negative 2, whatever number is in the parentheses, and I plug it in using parentheses in my calculator, I'm going to get this answer. So honestly, if I had to do synthetic division one time and I had to pick between these two methods, I would think both of them would, I mean, that's a personal opinion, but they're both going to take about the same amount of time. So I don't mind using synthetic division on a problem like example 2. But example 3, if I'm going to have to do synthetic division 4 times, I think I'm probably going to use the calculator method. So I'm going to plug in -1. This is just my personal opinion. I would plug in -1 into my calculator, make sure that you're using parentheses. And when I do that with -1, I get a remainder of, I've done this on my paper, I got a remainder of 4. When I plugged in -2 for every x, I got a remainder of 0. When I plugged in +1, I got a remainder of 0. And when I plugged in +2, I got a remainder of 52. You could also do synthetic division for each one of these numbers and you would get the same remainder. So on this problem, our factors are going to be x plus 2 and x minus 1, because when the remainder is 0, that proves that you have a factor. So my personal opinion, especially on a problem like example 3, I would just use my calculator instead of doing synthetic division. So you could do synthetic division and the remainder would be 4, the remainder would be 0, the remainder would be 0, the remainder would be 52, or you could use the calculator method. Get the same answer either way. This says 3 is a 0, so it's actually giving you a 0, and then it wants you to factor this polynomial. It wants to know what the factored form was. So your first step is to take this 0 that they give you and divide it into your polynomial using synthetic division. You have to use synthetic division here because you have to have a polynomial left. Your calculator's not going to give you a polynomial. So we're going to go through the synthetic division steps, except I just multiplied wrong right there. -6 times +3 is going to give me -18. If you don't get a remainder of 0 and they're telling you this number is a 0, then you've made a mistake. Because remember, when you have a 0 or a factor, then the remainder has to be 0. My second step is to subtract 1 from my highest exponent and put my variables back in my problem. So this is going to be 1p squared minus 1p minus 6, and then they want this factored. It's saying factored form. 6 is negative. This is a trinomial, so I'll use my sign rules. I'm going to need a p times a p to get the p squared, and then I need two numbers that multiply to be -6 that combine to be -1. That's going to be p minus 3 and p plus 2. Now don't forget that they gave you one of your zeros. So if this is a 0, if +3 is a 0, then that means the factor was p minus 3. So we have p plus 2, we have p minus 3, and then we have another p minus 3 because they told us that we had a 0 of 3. So that means my factors would be p plus 2. You probably could do p minus 3 twice, but the most simplified way to write that is p minus 3 squared. So again, these directions are different. For example 4, 3 is a 0 of the equation. What is its factored form? So the first step has to be take the number that they tell you is a 0, divide it using synthetic division. You must get a remainder of 0 because they're telling you 3 is a 0. If you don't, you've made a mistake. Take your remaining coefficients, subtract 1 from the highest degree, so it's going to be 1p squared minus 1p minus 6. Factor that, it should be a quadratic. And then don't forget that the 0 that they gave you also gives you another factor. All right, example 5 is something called the rational root theorem. It is a formula. So to find all the possible, key here is possible rational roots. You're going to take the factor of a sub 0, which will be your last term, and you're going to divide by the factors of a sub n, which is your first term. So in this problem, the formula does say plus or minus. All solutions or all possible rational roots could be positive or negative. So we're going to start with a sub 0, which is our last term. And factors of 4 are 1, 2, and 4. And we're going to divide that by the factors of a sub n, which is going to be your first term. And the factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. And then we'll simplify. So remember, the formula says plus or minus. And then what I do is I take the first number in the top, I divide it by all the numbers in the bottom. So 1 divided by 1 is 1. 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. 1 divided by 3 is 1/3. 1 divided by 6 is 1/6. Then I go to the next factor in the top. 2 divided by 1 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. I've already got 1, so I'm not going to repeat answers here. 2 divided by 3 is 2/3. I don't have that. 2 divided by 6 reduces to be 1/3, and I have that one. So go to the 4. 4 divided by 1 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Already have 2 listed. 4 divided by 3 is 4/3. 4 divided by 6 reduces to be 2/3, and I already have that. So those are my possible rational roots. They're not asking you to solve. They're not asking you for factors. They're just asking you for possible rational roots. So don't make this problem harder than it is, because to me, if you follow the formula and you understand what the formula is, this one's not going to be as hard as something like example 4. These were your challenge problems if you chose to do those, and then the answers are listed here. And then if we were in Class Connect, I would ask you how you felt about the lesson, and then you can definitely use the whiteboard link. It's in the announcements, and you can go ahead and save the whiteboard if you choose to do so. Hopefully this video is helpful.